Hey everybody, we are back for another episode of the Ship Show series. Today's Thursday, July 27th, 2023. It's episode number 28 in the yearly series. And I am great to be back after traveling for the last 2 weeks with my co host, the amazing Jason Brand. And as usual, we have a great show for you with amazing content and commentary. But this week, we would normally be doing the FMR, the Freight Market Roundup, but we have a special episode to discuss two emerging stories that's really going to affect supply chain as we move into the second half of 2023. So, first, Jason and I will unpack and provide an update on the UPS Teamsters strike that has been averted, as everyone probably knows, and that Jason has been talking about for the last week or so. And lastly, we want to talk about the bankruptcy of Yellow Freight, which is a real hot topic right now. So, with that, I would like to welcome my co-host and say, "Hey, Jason, what's happening?
Not
What's going
much,
on?"
Anthony. It's so good to see you. We've been busy over here at Supply Chain Solutions, and I got to tell you, obviously these situations are a stress for everyone out there. But when we're trying to provide the best possible service to our customers, and you've got companies going under that we use, that's never fun. So good news, but we're going to break it all down to you today. Anthony, so awesome to have you here. Obviously, everyone loves when we can kind of talk about things back and forth. It's fantastic. But
Absolutely.
oh yeah. So I am the director of outreach and partner development here at Supply Chain Solutions. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for joining us again. We represent Supply Chain Solutions, Anthony and I, and we provide our customers with truly a one-stop shop for all your logistics needs. So that includes just end-to-end access and services between over 160 countries we ship to and from each year, and not to mention our expansive warehouse network and our integrated technology solutions. So if you aren't using us yet, you need to contact us and you need to learn about all the services we provide because it is fantastic. So Anthony mentioned we're doing this special report today for everyone. And it involves the Teamsters and what's going on over with UPS and Yellow. And even though we touched on this subject a lot in the past couple shows, a lot of the deadlines we've been talking about and we've mentioned over these past episodes, they're actually coming due. So obviously the end of the month for UPS, and actually the deadline that was set was the 24th for Yellow, which hit earlier this week. And so, it's really important that you're taking notes, you're tuning in to understand what kind of disruption you could be dealing with or what kind of added costs you may be dealing with in the future. So I want to quick catch everyone up, make sure we're all on the same page. And as we just talked about, there are these two main contract situations going on. It is the renewal with UPS, but then also a change of contract request, which has been happening at Yellow since late winter of this year. And, to be really clear about this, you need to remember the Teamsters touch a lot of areas, not just these two areas. They've got contracts with a number of other companies, and they include both large and small companies, and they're across a variety of sectors as well. And this really is because, unlike some unions that represent workers in a specific industry, the Teamsters Union represents a highly diverse range of workers, and they're across many different industries. I mean, you've got members that include obviously truck drivers, but also airplane pilots, warehouse workers. We've got police officers, there's nurses, public defenders, but a lot more. And, as a little side note here, this UPS and Yellow situation aren't the only two contract renewals happening this year under the Teamsters. There are more happening right now. So you need to stay tuned in. You need to make sure some of these things won't affect you and they won't turn into disruptions in your network. Now, back to that UPS and Yellow. So one of the interesting things we're hearing between both of those situations is, there's been similar sentiments coming from the Teamsters of why this has kind of been such a fireworks show this year. And, in different ways, the Teamsters have been claiming that they gave each of these companies too much leeway in previous negotiations. And now this is the year they're going to be making up for those lost wages, lost benefits, and, so on. Now, you've got to remember that the Yellow situation, it's not a contract renegotiation or contract renewal. It is different, but that same kind of idea of too much leeway in the past definitely holds true there as well. And I think the one description you can, kind of say when talking about this is essentially the Teamsters are saying, hey, this year we're not going to take it easy on you. We're going to have a hard line and we're going to push hard. And if we don't get what we want, you're going to suffer. That's really been the sentiment we've seen for months now. And it's been the tone of the negotiations. So, to break it down, let's start with the UPS contract. The last one went into effect in 2018. The agreement did include wage increases. It created 5,000 new full-time jobs, and it guaranteed maintaining health benefits and welfare and so on and so forth, and also expanded that slightly for part-time workers. Now, the dilemma here is that actually a substantial majority of the Teamsters during that contract ratification, so after the tentative agreement happened back in 2018, a substantial number voted no, but it still was ratified. Why? They changed the way voting was happening. There was mail-in, essentially it was a mail-in voting process. It was a very short window. So at the end of the day, there was a little bit of confusion, but there is a rule that says if you don't hit a certain threshold of voters for a ratification vote, if it was a tentative agreement, it gets pushed through. So that's exactly what happened with the UPS agreement. You can imagine being stuck in a contract that many Teamsters did not agree on or voted explicitly no on for 5 years has kind of drummed up a lot of support to really, lay down a hard line this year. And that's exactly what we've seen with this UPS situation. Now, just in the past couple of weeks, we've got some substantial changes that have happened on the UPS side. So, we discussed this in the past, but there was a really early stalemate that happened in these talks. And actually, it was looking bad. They were, the trenches were dug in. It really didn't seem like UPS was going to give any leeway. Teamsters definitely weren't going to give any leeway. And you need to remember that the Teamsters are representing 340,000 people for UPS. It is a huge, huge workforce they control. But yeah, they had 20 days of silence. It was going to be a strike at the end of this month. But Tuesday, the 18th, UPS extended the olive branch. They got back to the negotiation table. And, just amazingly, they landed a tentative agreement. Now, one thing I want to note is right before that olive branch moment happened, the Teamsters and Yellow negotiations hit a brick wall. There was that pension issue that happened. And I mean, it really was spelling disaster for those negotiations. And then just literally like the next day, you had this olive branch come out to essentially say, hey, let's get back to the negotiation table. And sure enough, boom, that happened. So I do believe that kind of was influencing them being able to get back together. But that being said, in the past, UPS was saying they had industry leading pay. They literally were advertising their pay. They were showing the comparisons. They said, hey, we're doing a good job for our associates. So it's really amazing that what actually happened seems to be a pretty juicy contract for the Teamsters. So I'm going to quick run through it. Essentially, this new agreement gives part-time and full-time workers a $2.75 per hour bonus in 2023, which is going to work itself up to a $7.50 an hour more per hour by the end of the 5-year agreement. And it also includes provisions to increase the starting pay for part-time workers. So it originally was set as $16.20 for part-time workers for starting pay, and now it's going to be $21. Okay, Anthony, I just friggin' did a massive frame set. What's your opinions on this UPS situation?
Well, thank you, Jay, and what a great job. I mean, but let's keep in mind, though, as you talk about those wages, the agreement would also eliminate a two-tier wage system for certain workers and supposedly create 7,500 new full-time jobs for UPS, according to the Teamsters. And, what's really interesting, as Jason said, new 5-year agreement on Tuesday, 340,000 full and part-time workers. And, they really believe it's a win-win-win agreement on the issues that are really important and notice what they say here, that are really important to the Teamsters leadership, not our employees, but to the Teamsters leadership, who, they say represent their employees and want their best interests, but it's a win-win-win on the agreement for leadership, for employees, for UPS and our customers. And, I think this agreement, it's supposed to reward UPS's full and part-time employees with industry-leading pay and benefits, and it's going to give them the supposed flexibility to stay competitive, and serve their customers and keep their business strong. But I think at the same time, I think there's some problems here, and I mean they still have to come to a final agreement. Like they've agreed tentatively, okay. Now it's got to be ratified. And, what really kind of blew me away is they said that the agreement is great for UPS and the parcel industry and the labor movement and for shippers. But what they didn't tell the shippers, okay, is that the shippers are going to need to look at and understand the details because there's going to be a general rate increase by UPS in 2024. It's going to impact everything. Okay. So, what the cost impacts will be from the contract and how it's going to impact, UPS's general rate increase in 2024. So, to everybody out there, and it's not that we want to vilify these people. Everybody needs to make a good living and an honest wage and do what's right for their families and for their organization, right? But it's just like with the port workers, some of these people down at the ports with this ILWU that was a fly in the ointment last month, right? These people are making almost $200,000 a year, okay, and it just it's kind of just it sounds good, but there's a real, dichotomy here. And
you feel for them, but then at the same time, you're like, wow, that's a great wage.
Yeah. And I mean, think about it. Like, I think Jason said this, but the contract is going to set a base part-time pay at $21 an hour with more paid to part-time workers, with seniority. And then the average top wage for a full-time UPS Teamsters employee. So remember, they have, people that are not part of the union yet. They pay union dues, they get a union card, but they're considered journeymen until they go through a period of time before they become a full-time union member. But those UPS associates that are full-time UPS Teamsters, fully vested, these guys are making $49 an hour. Okay. So, I mean, I don't know. It's just a crazy situation here. Something we all really need to keep our finger in the pulse of, because we're going to see rates go up dramatically in 2024 because of the contract increase.
Yeah. And I personally think that when you look at how this contract is kind of spelled out, so it's the starting at a 250 increase, working its way up to the 750 increase. And then you remember at the very beginning of these negotiations, it was UPS saying, we're about $6 to $7 off an hour on what we're agreeing to pay. That's essentially what it was. UPS dug their heels and they said, we're paying great. And Teamsters want us to increase it by $6 to $7 an hour. Well, what essentially happened was the Teamsters got their full increase they wanted through this tentative agreement. And but I think when you look at that scale, I think what it says is that UPS is expecting costs to go up over time across the board. So they're willing to give that $2.75 an hour concession, which still is a ton. I think there was a report that said UPS is going to pay $30 billion more in a year because of this contract renewal. And that will be absorbed by shippers, by us. So, it's something we got to consider. And this happens at UPS. It's a trickle. It will affect everyone else. And that's, I think, why the Teamsters love this win so much. It's a huge bargaining unit. They got a ton. They got really a ton out of this bargain. It will set precedent. So, if you're getting great LTL rates right now, make sure you're considering that in the next couple of years, these costs will be rising because of what's happened here so far.
Yeah, and Jay, one last thing. I mean, when you think about it, not only when you talked about the voting and that essentially they moved the goalpost on the voting, okay, but they really believe that they set a new standard in the labor movement and raised the bar for all of their workers. And again, we have nothing against, people wanting to get paid and earn an honest living and make good wages, but they really believe they've changed the game, okay, by battling it out day and night to come to a deal to make sure that their members want on the agreement that pays strong, wages, rewards the labor, and doesn't require a single concession. But at the same time, what they didn't tell their client base is that there's going to be a general rate increase as we move into 2024. And it's just like we see in government, where the taxpayers end up footing the bill while the client's going to end up paying for this, new contract. So that's my final spin on that.
Yeah. No, that's a really good one. The good news here, obviously, is from a disruption standpoint, we're probably going to be all right. I mean, just seeing this deal, even though it's tentative right now, just looking at the numbers, it's. I'd be very surprised if this isn't ratified.
Yeah, and I think this is a good segue and a good gear shift, Jay, to talk about Yellow Freight and their bankruptcy, which was filed this past Monday.
So let me quick frame set, and I want you to dive right into that because
absolutely,
it's been. I mean, this one is. This has been the long and slow demise of Yellow, essentially, and it's a really ugly situation. But so here's the deal: the Yellow contract went into effect. And this is the last Yellow contract that went into effect back in 2019, and it had its fair share of controversy. Obviously, this is also after the 2018 contract went into effect for UPS that also had its controversy. So really a bad negotiating year as far as the Teamsters are concerned. Now, with Yellow, you've got around 24,000 Teamsters employees. So it's not nearly as much as you've got with UPS. And really the 24,000 is spread between these different companies. So it's the YRC, it's Holland, it's New Penn. And so there's a substantial amount less, but it still is a substantial amount of employees. Now, what's interesting about this 2019 contract renewal that happened was it was considered a concessionary year for the Teamsters. And they were helping Yellow kind of stay afloat because they were having some rough finances. But the controversy here is it really wasn't a single concessionary year. This was actually a double concessionary year. 2014 was really the year that was, Yellow was really pleading for them to, take it easy on them. They don't have the money to deal with some of the things that the Teamsters wanted. And, in their defense, it's been kind of amazing between 2014 and 2019, both of those years, passing some of these deals that were very concessionary. And there's been a lot of, when you leave the Teamsters leadership and you get down to the actual associate level, you realize there's been a lot of kind of pushback and not liking these agreements, not thinking they're in line with what the Teamsters stand for, and so on and so forth. So, this kind of spells disaster for the current situation with Yellow because it's not a contract renewal year, but Yellow was being hit really hard financially at the beginning of this year. It had some loans that were weighing on it extremely heavy. Its liquidity was just dropping aggressively. And they determined they desperately needed to restructure themselves. So back in May, they began this process of consolidating their terminals in their Western network. The goal was taking 20 of these YRC freight and Readyway facilities and closing 9 of them. So they wanted to consolidate these 20, close 9. And because this causes a direct threat to union jobs, they can't do this without union approval. So they did. They announced in a letter to the Teamsters, hey, we've got to make these changes, but we don't have the money and we don't have the time to go through the normal negotiations. We need this done now. We need your approval by June. So it's May. They're like, we need your approval by June so we can have this live by July. And that didn't go over well. Now, there was a previous restructuring that happened last year that they were able to push through very quickly. And so this was kind of Yellow felt like it was similar reasoning. And so they should be able to do this without much pushback. Unfortunately, that was not the case. And, while things started finding maybe somewhat stability, then they missed that second pension payment, and that really spooked everyone. So, Anthony, I know you've been diving into this. Break it down for us. What's your opinions? What are some key events that we're missing talking about? Just dive on in.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jason. I'm very grateful. You wonderful job as usual. And let's also set the stage for everyone and just let everyone know, as you so eloquently did, that Yellow was the fifth largest trucking carrier in the country. Okay, and all of us at Supply Chain Solutions, we knew that there was a reason to believe that when we found out that Yellow's board did not make the $50 million payment into the Teamsters pension fund, we knew that that was the death knell, and that bankruptcy was going to, follow shortly thereafter. And that's exactly what happened. And we're talking about an estimated 13,800 tractors and over 43,400 trailers where Yellow has that kind of capacity. And let's think about this. They employ not only the fifth largest trucking company, but the third largest LTL company. And they employ over 30,000 workers, and 22,000 to 24,000 of them are Teamsters members. And they had an operating revenue of $5.245 billion in 2022. So I think really the rub on this is everybody is going to see their trucking rates they're going to go up. Okay. And the data to really watch what we were watching at Supply Chain Solutions was, hey, what's going to happen if they do go bankrupt? Okay. And of course, sure enough, on Monday, they filed for bankruptcy. So while the LTL contract rates are off their peak, earlier in the year, the carriers are getting paid more per hundred rate now than they were in 2022 and 2021. And the LTL carriers have been more disciplined on price than the truckload market. And they've been really picking and choosing the right freight at the right price. It's almost like the container ship lines, what's going on now. We had a GRI, on the ocean side of the business on July 15th. Then they're about to implement another one on August 1st, and they're about to implement another one on August 15th because the GRIs have been successful. And so now container ship line people are, like, well, you know what? We want to book cargo that we're going to get a higher revenue on, regardless of what your contract says. So again, like in the trucking market, they're picking and choosing the right freight at the right price that's going to give them the most profitability. And I think LTL carriers will likely try to raise their contract rates by at least 9% to 12% in the coming months following Yellow's capacity being removed from the market. So now that they're bankrupt and the capacity, and think about it, all these tractors, all these trailers, are coming out of the market. Who's going to pick up the slack? Everybody's going to raise their price. And we have to remember that Yellow represents 9% to 12% of the less than truckload market. It's really a disproportionate market share in the Midwest, where the subsidiary Holland is based in the Northwest. Okay, so this is a real calamity. This is really gonna cause a lot of issues. And it kind of reminds me, back in the day, after I got out of college, I worked for a Swiss freight forwarder that was bought by Celadon Trucking. And it kind of reminds me of what happened when Celadon shut down in 2019, and the truckload industry had to absorb the volume. Okay. And, even though in those days the market was a little bit more flexible in the less than truckload area, it really caused a lot of issues. And a lot of times truckload carriers routinely shift dozens of over the road trucks from one region to another to balance the capacity and their needs in those networks. So right now, it's more difficult for LTL carriers to do this. So I think they're going to have to they're going to have the wind at their back, but the less than truckload contract rates, they may be holding up right now, but I think we're going to see a lot of volatility in the LTL market, Jay. I'm not sure what your opinion is on that, but
Yeah, no, it's funny because if you go back to 2019, YRC Yellow, they had a total of 351 terminals. And then at the start of 2023, they already had shed, they were down to 308. So they'd already shed a ton of terminals. And I think what's interesting about this is at the same time during the pandemic, we had FedEx not accepting new LTL customers. Actually, they started shedding massively a lot of their LTL customers because they said, if you are considered a challenging to service customer, you're not allowed to work with us anymore. I actually was about to be on a panel with an individual who was working for FedEx during this time. And she was, she was an account manager, very, very high up, had a bunch of these, accounts, but she had a portion that were just lost kind of due to this mass exodus not by, the actual shippers, but by FedEx saying, nope, you're not allowed in our network. We're at capacity and you make it challenging for us. It was kind of difficult for her because, some of the fundamentals that they had, built the business off of, she felt like they were kind of betraying in that sense. But I think it's a funny kind of comparison where you've got FedEx doing just incredibly well during the pandemic and then Yellow just sinking really during the pandemic. And what's actually also interesting is you've got other LTL carriers who are growing right now, who are expanding their networks. And part of this is in preparation for Yellow's collapse. So what was it?
yeah.
Estes opened up a 76 door terminal. And then you've got, oh my gosh, there's like two others. I think XPO opened an over 100 door terminal. All of this is happening right past couple of months. And then you've got Old Dominion saying that they're down, the market's in a 12%, dip right now. So it's interesting. I mean, you can kind of see some of these carriers knowing that capacity will come back and they can weather the storm and they're preparing. But in general, still LTL is kind of in a tough spot at the moment. So it's Yellow being in the situation they're in.
And Jay, well, one of the things I also want to mention, if you allow me, is
sure.
I think one of the trickier parts to Yellow's network, excuse me, is it's long haul retail freight, which they do a lot of, and shippers are really going to have to pay attention to the outbound tender rejection levels, particularly in Southern California. And they're really going to need to monitor this truckload capacity situation to see if the excess overflow volumes end up impacting the market, which, we feel that that's definitely going to impact the market. And I think if both LTL contract rates and Los Angeles tender rejections begin to pick up over the next week, we should really, take that as a signal that Yellow's exit, now that they're bankrupt and their capacity is coming out, is going to be putting pressure on trucking capacity in both the LTL and truckload market. And, just when we thought the market might have been turning the corner, on the other hand, if LTL contract rates and LA tender rejections stay flat or go lower, then we will know that the LTL industry had plenty of excess capacity that was ready to absorb Yellow's volumes, and shippers can really go forward with their Q4 plans with confidence. But at the same time, I think right now it appears that shippers are really going to bear the burden, of what's going on here right now. They're really going to bear the burden and repricing their freight and arranging with new carriers. And it's not going to be easy as simply pushing shipments out as overflow freight on their current contracts. Whether the disruption's enough to spark a small brush fire in a truckload market is open for questions. But one of the last things I wanted to touch on is, what we've been doing at Supply Chain is we've been speaking to all of our clients, talking about what we are doing to specifically preserve continuity and keep service and keep cost in line. Right now, we found out, from our domestic team and our domestic manager, Bob Lally, who who's got a wealth of experience and does a tremendous job with his team for supply chain solutions. Yellow's canceled all their pickups yesterday without any notifications. They've stopped pickups. They've stopped accepting freight altogether. And we're hearing that they're going to continue to make some deliveries to purge their network. But we're already seeing, diversions happening.
Mhm.
Okay. And in supply chain, of course, we've shut down our portal. We're already shifting capacity for our clients to other core carriers that we have contracts with that are ready, willing, and able to step in and replace Yellow's capacity at the agreed contract rate that we had with Yellow, if not better. Okay. And our domestic team and our domestic brokerage team, but particularly our domestic team at Supply Chain Solutions, has done a tremendous job with the outreach and the communications with our client base and working with our core carriers. And one thing about supply chain, I mean, we have $75 million of LTL and FTL domestic freight under our control with a lot of carrier contracts. So if anyone was dealing with Yellow directly and they're having an issue and you're out there listening, please contact myself, Jason, go to our website, reach out to Bob Lally. We are ready and willing and able, and we've already, prepped our staging area. We are ready to step in and handle all of your volume.
Mhm.
So, that's one thing about our company, very proactive, and we always have a plan A, B, C, and D. So we are ready to service you guys. Jason, back to you.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really great ending note too, because we've obviously seen a lot of things go sour during the pandemic, but we've also seen a lot of really incredible opportunities open up because of it. And with Yellow, the too big to fail situation obviously was not true, and from that though, you do have other opportunities popping up right now, and other capacity is coming into the market right now. So you actually might find yourself getting actually a great rate, even a better rate, and potentially even better service due to this switch. So if you're not really I wouldn't just switch your freight over for the sake of it and find the next available carrier. Let's really make sure we're taking your network to the next level. So guys, we really appreciate you guys joining us. It's been a heck of a journey over watching these kind of negotiations go down. Next week, join us for the Freight Market Roundup. Anthony and I are breaking it all down, and I'm sure we'll have a couple updates on some of the stuff that's happening still here next week as well, but plus everything across the globe. So make sure you tune in for your Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern little tune-up. And Anthony, close us out today.
Make it a great day, everybody.
Hey, thanks everyone.
See you later.